You are not broke because you're lazy. You are not broke because you're stupid. You are not broke because the economy is unfair, or because you didn't go to the right school, or because nobody gave you the right opportunity. You are broke because nobody ever showed you how money actually moves. Not the textbook version, not the motivational poster version, not the version they sell you on a weekend seminar for 3 easy payments of $99. The real version. The version that the people who are quietly building wealth right now while you're working already understand. And here is the maddening part. This version wasn't discovered last year. It wasn't uncovered by some tech billionaire or some finance guru with a podcast and a course to sell you. It was written down 500 years ago by a man who had nothing, who had been tortured, humiliated, exiled, stripped of every title, every connection, every comfort he had spent his life building. And from that place of absolute zero, he sat down and mapped out the principles of how power moves, how resources flow, how the few who understand the game accumulate, while the many who don't keep working and wondering why nothing ever changes. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli, and in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what he understood about money that you were never taught. Not because the information doesn't exist, because the people who benefit from you not knowing have made very sure you never learned it. The first thing nobody tells you about money. Let's start with the most uncomfortable truth in this entire video. Money is not a reward. Read that again in your head. Money is not a reward. From the time you were old enough to understand anything, you were taught a story. Work hard, be good, add value, and money will follow. It is a beautiful story. It is also almost entirely wrong. Not because hard work doesn't matter, not because value doesn't matter, but because that story is built on a premise that has never been true at any point in human history. The premise that money flows to the most deserving. Look around you. Look at the people in your life who work the hardest. The ones who are first in and last out. The ones who give everything to their job, their clients, their craft. Now look at what they have. And then look at the people who have built real wealth. Not all of them, but most of them did not build it by working harder than everyone else. They built it by understanding something everyone else didn't. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone who came before him or after. He believed that fortune favors the bold, but he also understood something less quoted and far more important. He wrote that the man who adapts his way of proceeding to the nature of the times will succeed, and the man who does not will fail. What does that mean in the language of money? It means money doesn't flow to the most deserving. Money flows to the person who best understands the terrain they are moving through. The rules of the game as they actually exist, not as we wish they did. This is the first shift. Stop asking, am I working hard enough? Start asking, do I understand how this actually works? The trap they built for you. Before we go further, I need to show you something. Because most people who hear the idea that money doesn't flow to the most deserving react in one of two ways. Either they get angry or they get hopeless. Neither reaction is useful, and both are exactly what the system is designed to produce. Here is how the trap works. From the beginning, you were taught to trade time for money. Hours worked equals income earned. This is the foundation of almost every financial framework most people ever operate inside of. And it is a cage. A comfortable cage. A cage with a salary and benefits and the feeling of security that comes from knowing exactly what is coming at the end of the month. But here is what the cage actually costs you. Time is finite. There are only 24 hours in a day. There are only so many years in a working life, which means the moment you accept that your income is determined by your hours, you have placed a ceiling on everything you will ever earn. And no amount of hard work, no amount of loyalty, no amount of being the best person in that office can break through a ceiling built into the structure of the agreement you signed. Machiavelli watched this same trap play out in the courts and kingdoms of Renaissance Italy. He watched men of extraordinary talent spend their entire lives serving powerful people, faithfully, brilliantly, completely, and end up with nothing the moment that powerful person lost power, or died, or simply decided they were done. They were, in Machiavelli's eyes, mercenaries of a different kind. Not soldiers for hire, but talented people who had rented out their capability instead of building their own. And he was unambiguous about what that choice ultimately produced. Dependency. And dependency is the enemy of wealth. Machiavelli's principle for money. Here is the principle, the one that runs underneath everything Machiavelli ever wrote about power, about resources, about who rises and who doesn't. He called it virtù. Not virtue in the moral sense, not goodness or righteousness or playing by the rules. Virtù in Machiavelli's language meant something entirely different. It meant the force of one's own capacity, the ability to shape your circumstances rather than be shaped by them, the willingness to act rather than react, the discipline to build something that belongs entirely to you that no one can strip away when the political winds shift. In the context of money, virtù means this: stop building someone else's asset. Start building your own. And I know that sounds simple. I know you've heard some version of that 100 times. But here is what nobody explains. The reason most people never make that shift is not because they don't want to. It is not because they're lazy. It is not because they don't have the talent. It is because building your own thing requires a specific and deeply uncomfortable kind of thinking that the system you were raised in actively trained out of you. It requires thinking in terms of leverage. Leverage is the most important word in the vocabulary of wealth that almost nobody teaches in school. Leverage means getting more output from the same or less input. It means your time producing results that do not stop when you stop. It means your knowledge working in more than one place at once. It means building systems, relationships, assets that generate without requiring your constant presence. Machiavelli understood leverage not as a financial concept, but as a structural one. He wrote that the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The wise man builds the structure before he needs it.
The fool waits until the crisis arrives and then scrambles to build under pressure with no time and no options. Most people build their financial life like the fool. They wait until the job disappears. They wait until the savings run out. They wait until the urgency is so overwhelming that every decision they make is a panic decision, a desperation decision, a decision made from scarcity rather than strategy. The Machiavellian approach to money is to build the structure now, when you still have time, when you still have options, when the pressure is low enough that you can think. The 4 reasons you stay broke. Let me get specific now, because Machiavelli was never interested in abstract principles without concrete application. He wrote for people who needed to act. So in that spirit, here are the 4 reasons most people stay broke, mapped directly onto Machiavelli's understanding of power. Reason 1. You are waiting for permission. Machiavelli was ruthless on this point. He understood that a man who waits for others to open the path will wait forever. And yet this is exactly what most people do with money. They wait for the raise that someone else has to give them. They wait for the promotion that someone else has to grant them. They wait for the opportunity that someone else has to see in them first. They have outsourced the single most important decision about their financial life to someone who does not have their interests at heart. Permission is not coming. Or if it comes, it will come on someone else's timeline, at someone else's price, with someone else's conditions. The Machiavellian move is to stop asking and start building. Reason 2. You are optimizing for comfort instead of position. This one is subtle, and it is perhaps the most dangerous of the 4. Comfort is not the enemy of wealth in the obvious sense.
Nobody becomes rich by suffering unnecessarily. But comfort becomes deadly when it stops you from making the moves that position you for something bigger. Machiavelli wrote that men are so attached to present advantages that they resist changes even when those changes would clearly benefit them in the long run. You see this everywhere in the financial lives of people who stay stuck. The job that pays just enough to make leaving feel risky. The side project abandoned because the first month was hard and the salary was still coming in. The investment never made because the money felt safer sitting still. Comfort is the velvet rope between where you are and where you could be. And most people never cross it, not because they can't, but because crossing it feels like loss before it feels like gain. Reason 3. You are consuming instead of creating. The economy you live in was built to make you a consumer, not a creator, not a builder, not an owner. A consumer. Someone who earns so they can spend, so they can earn more, so they can spend more, in a cycle that produces comfort, but never wealth. Machiavelli understood that real power never sat on one side of a transaction. Real power owned the transaction. The merchant who builds the trade route rather than traveling it for someone else. The craftsman who builds the guild rather than working inside one someone else controls. In modern terms, the person who builds the platform rather than just using it. The person who owns the asset rather than renting its output to someone else. Every hour you spend consuming is an hour not spent creating something that could work for you while you sleep. Reason 4. You are playing a short game in a world that rewards the long one. This is the one that separates almost everyone who builds real wealth from everyone who doesn't. Not intelligence, not talent, not even starting capital. Time horizon. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who thinks only of present advantage plants the seeds of his own future ruin.
Because every short-term decision has a long-term cost, and most people never see the cost until they are already paying it. The side project abandoned after 2 months because it wasn't profitable yet. The investment liquidated at a loss because the short-term dip felt unbearable. The relationship never built because the payoff wasn't immediate. Wealth, real wealth, is almost always the result of a long and patient and deeply uncomfortable commitment to a direction that doesn't pay off right away. The question is not, can you see the long game? The question is, can you play it when the short game is pulling at you every single day? What the rich understand that you don't. Let me tell you something that will probably make some of you uncomfortable. The people getting rich while you stay where you are not smarter than you. They are not more talented. They are not more disciplined in every area of their lives. They have not worked harder or sacrificed more or suffered longer. In many cases, they started with more. And that is real, and that is worth acknowledging. But here is what they understand that regardless of starting point changes everything. They understand that money is a tool, not a destination. Most people treat money as the goal. I need more money. I want more money. If I had more money, everything would be different. And so every financial decision they make is aimed at acquiring money. More income, more savings, more in the account. The people building wealth are not thinking about money. They are thinking about what money does, what it builds, what it buys when deployed correctly, what it creates when it is put to work rather than simply accumulated. Machiavelli never wrote about money in isolation. He wrote about resources, and resources in his framework were always in service of something. Position, influence, durability, the ability to sustain your operation through adverse conditions, the ability to move when the moment requires movement, the ability to wait when waiting is the correct strategy. Translate that into money, and here is what it means. The wealthy person does not ask, how do I earn more? They ask, what do I build?
That earns whether I am working or not. They ask, what skills, what relationships, what assets give me options that other people don't have. They ask, not, am I comfortable today, but am I positioned for 5 years from now? And the answer to those questions almost always points in the same direction, away from trading time for money, toward building things that compound. The Machiavellian money moves. Let me get practical, because philosophy without action is just well-informed inertia. Here are the moves, the specific shifts that align with everything Machiavelli understood about how resources accumulate in the hands of the few. Move 1. Build one skill to the level of rare. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who is indispensable is the prince who cannot be ignored. Most people spread themselves across many skills at a mediocre level. They are competent at many things, exceptional at nothing. And in a world full of competent people, competence is invisible. Find the one skill that sits at the intersection of what you are good at, what the world values, and what most people are not willing to do the work to develop. Then go all the way in, until you are one of the few, not one of the many. Rare commands a premium, always. Move 2. Stop renting your output and start owning your output. When you work for someone else, you produce value, but the ownership of that value belongs to them. The product they sell, the system they build, the reputation they grow using what you created. This is not a moral criticism. It is a structural observation. Employment is a reasonable trade, your time and skill for their certainty and infrastructure. But it is a trade with a ceiling.
The moment you begin to own even a small portion of your output, a side project, a product, a piece of content, a service sold directly, the ceiling begins to lift. Start somewhere. Small is fine. Small is how everything begins. Move 3. Build relationships before you need them. Machiavelli was precise about this. He wrote that the prince who makes allies only in times of crisis will find that allies made in crisis come at a terrible price. Most people network transactionally. They reach out when they need something. They make the connection when the opportunity appears. They build the relationship only when the urgency demands it. And every time they find that the relationship is not deep enough to hold the weight they are putting on it. The Machiavellian move is to build the relationship now, when you have nothing to ask for, when there is no transaction on the table, when the only reason for the connection is the connection itself, because relationships built in calm are the ones that hold in the storm. Move 4. Control your information diet. This one sounds small. It is not. Machiavelli warned that the prince surrounded by flatterers, the people who tell him what he wants to hear rather than what he needs to hear, is always moving toward ruin. In the modern world, this looks like spending your mental bandwidth on content designed to entertain you rather than content designed to educate you. Scrolling through the highlight reels of other people's apparent success while your own potential sits untouched in the background. Consuming opinions rather than building understanding. The mind that builds wealth is a mind that is constantly being sharpened on the right material. Protect what you let in, because what you consume determines what you think, and what you think determines what you build. The thing that will actually change your life. I want to stop for a moment and say something directly. Everything in this video is true, and none of it will change anything for you if you walk away and do nothing. I know that sounds obvious, and yet most people will watch this, nod along, feel something shift somewhere in the chest, and then go back to exactly what they were doing before. Because change, real, lasting financial change, is not produced by understanding a principle. It is produced by making one different decision, and then another, and then another, until the decisions become a pattern, and the pattern becomes a life.
Machiavelli wrote his greatest work from nothing. No money, no position, no allies in the places that mattered. Just a mind that understood how the world actually worked, and the discipline to put that understanding into words that have outlasted everything that was done to him. He didn't wait to feel ready. He didn't wait for the circumstances to improve. He didn't wait for someone to believe in him before he believed in himself. He picked up the pen. The question for you is not, do you understand what needs to change? You do. The question is, what is your pen? What is the first move, the first decision, the first small and imperfect and necessary step that you take today? Not next month, not when the time is right, today, in the direction of building something that belongs to you. Let me bring this back to where we started. You are not broke because you are not enough. You are where you are because nobody showed you the terrain. Nobody drew the map. Nobody explained the rules of the game you have been playing your entire life. Machiavelli drew the map. 500 years ago, in a language so honest that it made powerful people uncomfortable for 5 centuries. Money does not flow to the deserving, it flows to the positioned. Wealth is not a reward for hard work, it is the result of leverage applied consistently over time. The trap is real, but it is not a life sentence.
The permission you are waiting for is not coming from outside. It has to come from you. And the 4 moves are not complicated. Build one skill to rare. Own your output, not just your effort. Build relationships before you need them. Feed your mind on what sharpens it. None of it is easy. All of it is available to you. Starting now. The people getting rich while you wonder why are not waiting for the perfect moment. They already started. Some of them started badly, imperfectly, with the wrong tools and the wrong plan and no guarantee of anything. But they started. And starting badly is infinitely more powerful than not starting at all. If this hit you the way I think it did, if something in the last 25 minutes made you see something differently, or feel that uncomfortable clarity of a truth landing somewhere it needed to land, then do 3 things. First, decide what your first move is. Not next week. Today. One small decision in the direction of building something yours. Second, hit the like button. Not as a favor to me, but because it tells the people who need this most that this video exists. The algorithm shows people what other people value. If this was valuable to you, help it reach the person who is sitting exactly where you were 30 minutes ago. And third, hit subscribe. Because this is not the only conversation like this we are going to have. There is more coming. Deeper, more specific. More of what Machiavelli understood that the world forgot to teach you. And turn on the notification bell, because the person who catches these videos early, who doesn't wait for the algorithm to eventually decide they are ready, is the same person who doesn't wait for permission to build their wealth. They move first. Be that person.